I am very happy to welcome Dr. Rebecca Schnall today to talk to us a little bit about the AWARE study.
So as you can see, we call this the AWARE study. That was what the National Institute of Health had originally titled this initiative. It's American Women Assessing Risk Epidemiologically. And our study is specifically focusing on social, ecological, network factors so that we can better understand the risk for acquisition of both HIV and STI, sexually transmitted infections, in a cohort of cisgender women. And one of the things that I think we'll talk about throughout today is that this study, I think, is really unique and a wonderful opportunity for us to learn more about women and to help improve women's health, because this will be a national study. Most HIV prevention, STI prevention up until now, and before we so broadly use social media, was more like center-based studies, or you would have collaborations between centers. But this study really is capitalizing on our use of social media, as well as our ability to be able to do many of the tests, biomarker sampling that we'll talk about today. So STI testing, HIV testing remotely. And so you'll learn about this and hear how women don't need to go into the clinic to go get tested or go into our study site, but we're able to conduct most of the visits via Zoom, and then you mail back packages to the lab. So again, I think an exciting time. I think we've learned a lot through COVID on how we can do things differently. And we've all suffered a lot as well through COVID, but I think this has really been a nice opportunity for us to help improve the health of women. I'll introduce you to our team. I am co-leading this project with two other investigators, and I'll tell you a little bit about me and then a little bit about my other principal investigators. I'm a registered nurse with a master's in public health, so I have very much of a public health lens to my clinical nursing degree. And then I have a doctoral degree in nursing. I was trained at Columbia University and I'm currently on faculty there. I'm the nurse on the team. Amy Johnson, she is based out of Lurie Children's Hospital, has worked with cisgender women as well as adolescents. And she is a social worker, doctorally prepared social worker. So I, again, bring the nursing lens, Amy brings the social work lens, and then finally Miriam Kempf is at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and she is an epidemiologist. So she studies infectious diseases. So we love to think about and talk about how we really bring a lot of different disciplinary perspectives, but we also have different geographic perspectives from the Northeast, the Midwest, and the Southeast, which I think is also really critical when we're thinking about this national sample and looking at women broadly across the country. We also have other team members who are experts in infectious diseases, alcohol use. We have an ethicist on our team. We have an expert in HIV prevention in women. We have several data analysts. So really comprehensive teams. We can try to tackle what still remains an issue for women in the US. So with that, I want to bring us to some of the background about HIV among women in the US right now. So where are we at? It's 2023, and we've seen a decrease overall, but yet we still have about 7,000 new infections in cisgender women. And so some of you may be very familiar with the EHE, which is the end the HIV epidemic, and that was part of the federal national strategy to ultimately eliminate HIV in this country. And one of the things that we appreciate is that we cannot do that unless we've eliminated it among all of the segments of the population. And so there's been a lot of attention the past decade, and we're well aware that most of the new infections are in men, mostly MSM, mostly young MSM, mostly MSM of color. However, there still needs to be attention paid to women so that we can really overcome the current epidemic and really drive ourselves to zero, which is our goal. We've seen, again, much progress in these HIV rates among women, certainly since the 80s, but yet we really are trying to just figure out exactly what some of these factors are so that we can help women become less likely to become infected with HIV, and then also STIs that we'll talk about over their lifetime. There continue to be racial ethnic disparities in HIV infection rates, with higher new infection rates in Black and African American women, followed by Hispanic and Latinx women, and then finally in white women. So those are the current infection rates. We want to talk about what we know, and then what we're hoping to learn from this study is that we know that heterosexual contact is the predominant form of HIV transmission among women. About 85% of women are infected through heterosexual contact, and then 15% through injection drug use. However, there's several other factors. We know that this is multifactorial. Our lives are complicated. And so we're trying to better understand some of these other factors that potentially can contribute to new infections, and eventually hoping to target some of those. So other factors that have been well studied: socioeconomic conditions, poverty and unemployment, substance use, and then high-risk sexual behavior, unprotected intercourse, and concurrent relationships. And then to talk about a little bit about the vulnerabilities among women. So individual level sexual behaviors, transactional sex, coercion, violence. We'll talk again more specifically about this study, but we've been working very hard to integrate interpersonal violence, since we know that that is a risk factor for acquisition of STIs and HIV. So we can better understand some of those factors. Sex partners with unknown HIV status. But ultimately, the cohort studies that have been conducted in the US, they fail to link individual level behaviors with the risk for HIV infection. So there's no one profile that says, like, this is the woman who's going to become infected with HIV. It just really becomes more important for us to be able to kind of understand more, what is it that we can do to help women to avoid infection and to understand what these risk factors are. The other factor that we've seen throughout the literature, and is also part of our study, is that we know that women whose partners are released from incarceration are at very high risk for HIV acquisition, given low rates of condom use, lack of HIV testing, and lack of information about prison-related risks to HIV acquisition. So we're aware of that, but we haven't fully studied that. And so that's one of the goals. Alcohol and other substance use and HIV risk in women. Substance use prior to sexual encounters has been associated with greater HIV risk in women. Women who consume alcohol, cannabis, other substances before or during sex are more likely to have unprotected intercourse and to have multiple sex partners. Again, some of the background that we all know well, but we are looking to see a little bit more if we can understand some of these targeted behaviors, and then hopefully some targeted interventions related. And then finally, use of injection drugs and sharing needles. Unfortunately, I think with the use of this is that there's gender-specific risk environments that we know women often face the burden of poverty and economic factors, in many cases much more so than men. And so this again puts women much more vulnerable to the risk of acquisition of HIV and STIs. There's multiple level risk factors for women. And so we've talked about racism, sexism, poverty, discrimination, violence, but these are barriers that really have fueled racial ethnic inequities in HIV acquisition among women. And so another area that has become a priority for this study, as well as the National Institute of Health, the federal government, local government institutions, initiatives, is focusing on HIV infection among women of color. And in particular, our study, our goal is to enroll at least half of the women will be women of color. That 25% incidence rate is such a priority area for us to be able to really focus on women of color. And then I think this is one of the innovations of this study that really hasn't been well studied. I don't know how much people have seen some of these social network analyses and characteristics, but we know that women that frequently have sex with men from multiple sexual networks, they have higher rates of HIV infection. But until more recently, it's been harder to study some of these networks. And so that is one of the goals of this study as well, is that we're going to be enrolling 1,800 women, but then we'll be taking a subsample of the women, about 200 of the women, and we'll be asking women within our cohort to send out surveys to their network. So if you think about most research, if anyone's ever participated in a study, or if you've read studies or aware of them, most research is on the person who comes into the clinic, right? Who signs a consent form and who participates in the study. But we don't ask a lot about the other people in your lives and what are the other people in your lives doing. And so I think that's something that's, again, really unique, innovative, and exciting about what we're doing as part of this study, is that we are looking at people's social networks. Again, if they're willing to share who these people are, and then the people need to consent as well to participate. We'll know more. We don't know a lot. We hypothesize that social networks are an important predictor, but that will be one of the goals of this study. So now let's talk about the AWARE study. I've spoken a lot about all the traditional demographic behavioral risk factors, right? We know about substance use. We know that there's racial ethnic disparities. But we still don't have a great predictive model to say, like, you're the woman who's an injection drug user, and you're going to end up with HIV. And how many of us we know of other women who they engage in lots of risky behavior, sexual risk behavior, injection drug use, and they're never infected. And so that's really the goal of this study, is so that we can better understand what is it. As I said, another goal was to look at social networks. And then one of the other pieces that's really unique and specific and so important to women is focused on pre-exposure prophylaxis. We know that PrEP works. It works well. It works well in women. It works well in men. Men and women don't like taking PrEP. It's not gender specific, but women are worse at it than men. So uptake of PrEP is about 10%. And so again, another thing that we're looking at and trying to better understand in this study is, who are these 10% of women who are taking PrEP? We also will be doing something called urine assays, where we collect a small sample of urine so that we can see, if you say that you're taking PrEP, are you really taking PrEP? And the goal of that isn't because we don't believe any individual person who's participating in the study, but it really helps us to get biological verification so that we can better understand, characterize, appreciate when women say they're taking PrEP, are you really adherent to the PrEP? When you report that you're not adherent, are you actually adherent? And so the collection of the urine and our testing it for Truvada levels, which is the active ingredient in PrEP, tenofovir, that will be really useful and helpful as one of the goals of this study. PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. It's a once daily pill that has been approved by the FDA, by the Food and Drug Administration. The active ingredient is tenofovir. And it has been demonstrated that people who take PrEP consistently, essentially there's no acquisition of HIV if it's taken consistently. The data is a little bit more unclear. If you're taking it as little as 4 times a week, there still can be protective value to it. But again, the woman who takes it every single day can be pretty much assured that she will not acquire HIV. It does not provide any protection against any other sexually transmitted infections, so that's important. That's a quick snapshot and the most relevant for women. I think for PrEP for men, there's some other availability of injection, long-acting cabotegravir, but I think that's less relevant for our discussion today, so we'll just focus on the once daily. So the objective of this study is to develop a knowledge base to identify the theoretically driven correlates of HIV seroconversion. So women who are newly infected with HIV, STI incidence, so new infections, sexually transmitted infections, and then the predictors of PrEP uptake. Who are the women who are taking PrEP, and then who are the women who are staying adherent to PrEP? The findings from this study will increase our understanding of what are these vulnerabilities for women to acquire HIV, as well as enhance identification of PrEP eligibility. So we have this sample of 1,800 women, and how many of them are taking PrEP and how many of them were actually eligible for PrEP? Because we know that just because you have some of the vulnerabilities to acquisition of HIV doesn't mean that you're necessarily eligible for PrEP. So we will better understand that. And then, as I said, this data will be a robust knowledge base. It's on 1,800 women from across the US. And we do foresee that there will be future interventions, which will hopefully help us decrease incidence of both HIV and STIs among women living in the US. There's several study aims. I'm going to go to the next page where we'll talk through each of them. Actually, well, first let's talk about the study samples. I think this will be of great public health benefit. The participants currently, our lower age limit is 17 years of age. We are working with both our IRB, which is our ethics committee at Columbia University, as well as the National Institute of Health, to reduce the age. We will likely reduce it to 14 years of age. Much of the consideration is related to consent around STI, HIV testing, and it's nationally. So we're not only looking at New York state law, but we need to look at this more broadly. Female sex assigned at birth. So our study is not open to transgender women. This AWARE study, we have 2 other studies that were funded under the same initiative, and there is another study that's solely focused on transgender women. So if anyone wants more information on that, I would be glad to introduce people to that study team. But again, our focus here is on cisgender women, as well as currently identify as a female. Understand and read English or Spanish. Claudia Michaels is one of our study coordinators for the AWARE team, is fully bilingual in Spanish and English, as well as is about half of our study team. And we have made a commitment that all of this research is available to both English and Spanish speakers, because again, I think that in order for us to be able to enroll and understand the needs of Latina women, we need to make all of our study material in English and Spanish. So if you know of people who are Spanish speakers, please send them to us and we will give them more information on the study. The requirement is to live within the US and its territories. We've had a lot of interest in the study from women who are at risk or currently living with HIV outside of the US. Unfortunately, that's not, or fortunately, I don't know, either way you could see it, but that's not the goal of this study. There's a lot of research being conducted on women who are living outside of the US. But this study, again, is really our focus and our mission to focus on women living within the US and its territories. And I will add, again, territories is obviously including Puerto Rico, largely Spanish speaking. And so if people have family, colleagues, friends, please do let them know about this study. Women currently need to report being HIV negative or unknown status. I haven't been tested. I don't know what my status is. And then self-report unprotected vaginal or anal sex with a male in the past 6 months. In addition to all this inclusion criteria, potential participants also must meet one of the following in the past 6 months, other than incarceration, which must have occurred in the past 5 years. So incarceration's at the bottom of the list. So let's go through in the past 6 months: injection or non-injection drug use, alcohol dependence, binge drinking, self-reported history of sexually transmitted infections such as gonorrhea, chlamydia, or syphilis, exchange of sex for commodities such as drugs, money, or shelter, or a male sexual partner with reported history of injection, non-injection drug use, sexual transmitted infections, HIV diagnosis, binge drinking, alcohol dependence. And then this incarceration is within the past 5 years, incarceration of your partner or yourself within the past 5 years. And you need to have been incarcerated for greater than 24 hours. In that case, you would most likely be eligible to participate in our study. Again, there's few other things, but this is the inclusion criteria. The exclusion criteria are persons for whom an investigator determines that participation may be detrimental. So severe cognitive deficit, we need women to be able to consent, and it's providing informed consent. So it's not just signing the form, but if we have a participant, again, I can just give an example, who comes, appears confused, intoxicated, we cannot then consent you to participate in the study because you're not informed about what the risks are. And that's really important for us, is that everyone understands what the potential risks are, as well as the potential benefits of the study. And then a person who's unable or unwilling to provide consent. And women who are HIV positive are not eligible for the cohort study, but there is another component of the study that women are eligible for. So important for everyone to understand that this is a national study. You can live anywhere in the US, and you do not come in person to our study site. So I think, again, one of the conveniences, innovation, real great parts of this study is that you don't have to worry about sitting on the train from Brooklyn to Washington Heights for 2.5 hours to participate in this study. We're working with advertising agencies, also Facebook, Instagram. You may have seen some of our posts. These are some of our sample ads that we're posting. I'll show you on the next slide some additional ads. We'll send you a link and you fill out then a screener on the link. First, you fill out consent to screen, and then you fill out the screener. and we'll determine then if you're eligible. If we do determine that you're eligible, we will follow up with you. We then set up a call with you via Zoom and we verify your identity. I'll go through that a little bit also. And then we send you a study package. So I'll go through all of those procedures, but everything essentially is online. You will need to be face-to-face on Zoom so that we can see who you are. We also walk you through the procedures, but you don't need to go anywhere. So I think, again, really appealing. Here's some of our study ads, which have been designed and developed by women. That's also part of our AIM 1 that we'll be talking about more, and you'll see English and Spanish across all of our study materials. So the first aim has been to work on these recruitment materials, as well as better designing just some of our study procedures. And so we've been doing in-depth interviews with 3 different groups, cohorts. The first are women who are eligible for our cohort study. So we've described what those inclusion criteria are. The second group are women diagnosed with HIV. We've increased the range. It's diagnosed with HIV within the past 3 years, not 12 months. And so we're really hoping if you are a woman who's been recently diagnosed and you're comfortable talking with us. Again, our study procedures, what you wish other women would know, we would love to conduct an in-depth interview with you. It's one-on-one with our study coordinator via Zoom, and there is compensation for participating in that. It's about an hour long, the in-depth interview. And then the third group is experts and key stakeholders. So advocates, consumer advisory boards in the field of HIV prevention and treatment for women living with HIV. The interview procedures are here. And again, everything in English or Spanish. We have informed consent. We do all the interviews in Spanish or English, depending on the participants' preferences. And here's just some sample questions so people can see and feel like if you're comfortable answering these types of questions, but it's in a private one-on-one in-depth interview setting. The second part of our AIM 1 is a Delphi survey. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. That's really focused on experts and developing a new HIV knowledge tool. I'll just talk for 20 seconds just to say that the HIV knowledge questionnaire in the past 25, 30 years, 40 years at this point, was developed in the early 90s. And so it's largely outdated. And so we're working on updating that because we think that's so important for us to have a measure of HIV knowledge. And then our STAR study component that we've been highlighting today is this recruitment of 1,800 women from across the US and the US territories. Participants will consent to participate. It's e-consent. You sign online, and then you complete a pretty long survey, not terrible, but it's an all online survey. We ask questions about sociodemographic factors, depression, anxiety, again, so we can just better understand. You can see here, we do ask about reproductive autonomy, pregnancy, coercion, substance use, traumatic life events, discrimination, adverse childhood experiences, and then just other comorbidities, and then social support as well. Women who enroll in the study, we ask you to commit to participate for 24 months. It's a 2-year follow-up period with visits every 6 months. We will reach out to you every 6 months and ask you to complete additional surveys as well as provide us with samples that we're going to talk about now. We ask for blood samples, a small finger prick, very small, so that we can look for HIV and syphilis. And then we also ask women to self-collection tube to collect a vaginal swab for gonorrhea, chlamydia, and trichomosis. I know some women are like, how does this happen? I've never done this. We give you an instruction sheet where we show you how to use all the supplies. We consent over Zoom. You agree to participate. We send you a sample collection package with all of these materials in it. Nothing that you have to do at home other than go to your door, get your FedEx package, open it up, and then we schedule a Zoom with you where we walk you through the procedures, and we also administer the survey at that time. We do ask for identification. This is so that we can verify who you are. We don't hand over the ID, but we have had fraud in instances of of other studies. And so we also provide our identification for our study team members so that you know who you're meeting with. So for your protection, do ask your study coordinator for their identification so that you know who you're meeting with. Well, as you do the finger prick, you collect the blood, it goes into a little tube. You put it back into another FedEx package that we give to you with postage paid on it. So you don't have to do anything other than find the FedEx box. Put your samples back in there, and then our study team follows up with you if you are positive for any STIs or HIV. If you are not positive, then you don't hear back from us for another 6 months. And at that point, we give you another survey, we mail you another package, and we ask you to self-collect the samples again. At each time point, we do offer compensation. It's an increasing scale. So the longer you stay in the study, the higher the compensation is at each time point. The compensation is for your time. We appreciate the time that everybody's giving to us. And so we want to be able to compensate you for giving that time to us. This is what your package will look like when it does arrive in the mail. All of these things will be inside. You'll know kind of what to anticipate, or you can tell your friends, family, if they do participate, that's what it would look like. To spend just a minute or two on the network survey, because I think it's exciting and not so familiar to many of us, is that we will be randomly selecting about 200 women from the 1,800 women, and we'll be asking you if you have 5 people within your network who you're willing to let them know about the study and asking them to fill out a survey. Those people will have to consent on their own to fill out the survey. They'll fill out the survey and we will compensate them as well. That's an additional opportunity, I think, a way also to advance science, help us learn more, improve some of the public health outcomes of the study by, again, looking at some of our networks. But you also have the opportunity to say, I did the one part I want to do. I don't want to involve my networks in this. And you certainly don't need to. If we ask you, you say, I want to, you say you don't want to, either way, and you will still be able to continue in the cohort study. So again, letting people know it's out there, I think it's great, but there's also certainly women who won't feel comfortable in terms of confidentiality, privacy, and we very much respect that, and that won't in any way compromise your participation in other components of the study. And then the last piece, which is less, I think, like the participants in the study, but I think is also very interesting, especially because this is a national study, is that we will be looking at census level data and looking at differences, because we will, again, be collecting this biomarker data. We'll be looking at STIs in women. We'll have a lot of survey data of women who self-report their demographic characteristics, and then we'll be able to look at that within the context of our census level data, which is poverty rates, crime and disease, unemployment rates. Because again, as we talked about earlier, there are many demographic characteristics as well as these geospatial public policy factors, right? We know rurality is a big factor, women who can't access their providers, which again, I think is one of the real strengths of this study, is that we're mailing you the package. You don't have to come into the clinic. You live 150 miles away. That's not very practical. And it's sometimes not even practical to get to the doctor when you need to. And so this will be a great opportunity for these women to be able to participate in this study, as well as for us to learn more on how we can help improve healthcare access more broadly throughout the country.
If women who are HIV positive want to participate, how is it determined that they tested positive in the past 3 years? Is that just something you report yourself, or is there other sort of ways of stating that?
We usually ask for women to provide some kind of documentation.
If over the course of the study, someone does test positive for any of these STIs or HIV or anything, do you help them connect to care for that?
We do. So if you do test positive over the course of this study, we are required to report to the health department. So women should know that that will be reported, and then we will help you connect to care. We help you find local resources, and we do follow up with women to ensure that they have done that. Ultimately, we follow up with you as much as you want us to follow up with you, but if women don't want us to continue contacting them, we won't harass you endlessly and needlessly if you don't want to hear from us anymore, because that's your autonomy. So, but we definitely will follow up. We will help you find referral resources.
Do you have an upper age limit of participants in this? I know the bottom right now was 17, and you were working on sort of the consent legality for making it 14, but is there a upper limit?
So at the moment, 64 is our upper age limit, but I will give the caveat that we are strongly considering reducing that. So officially, that's what it is, but I just want women to know that if at a later date you do try to enroll, but we don't actually tell you why you're not eligible. So you won't know,
Yes.
but you'll see that age range has decreased. And that decision, if that is made, is again, it's a limited amount of resources. We can only enroll 1,800 women, and we want to ensure that we're enrolling the women who are at highest risk for HIV and STI acquisition so that we can learn the most from the study. And we wish that we had endless resources. I was speaking to the epidemiologist, Miriam Kemp, and we wish this was truly a surveillance study, right? Where we could just be surveying, but we only unfortunately have the resources for the 1,800 women. And then this might also be an opportunity for other women who are advocates who may not be eligible for other reasons in any of the studies, is that we are convening a community advisory board. We're currently forming, and I think we have about 4 members. We're targeting about 12. We anticipate about quarterly meetings. It might be 3 times a year, certainly not very frequent. We don't want to burden people, but we are looking for the community advice, engagement, guidance as we go forward with the study. Exact role will kind of evolve because at this point, right, we're really looking for more guidance on recruitment strategies. That's the stage that we're in, but then this will eventually be looking more at retention strategies, and then analytic strategies, and what are some of the most important questions that we want to be asking from the perspective of the community. I do want to put that opportunity out here. We don't have specific eligibility criteria. It most closely mirrors those people in those 3 groups, which was pretty broad. Again, women living with HIV, women who are potentially vulnerable to HIV, as well as stakeholders. And so people who are working with women in the community. If there's anyone who's interested in that, please do reach out to us. Again, we're looking for this ongoing commitment of it's 4+ years at this point. So we're hoping that women will want to stay as part of that. And part of our selection is that we are looking for geographic representation. There is a small honorarium for your time. The women who are looking to participate, it can also be men who are stakeholders or community advocates. Here's the email address. So please do send us an email. If you're interested in the community advisory board, it's probably helpful if you just put that in the subject line versus if you want to screen, if you put the topic, but we read all of the emails, and someone from the team will definitely get back to you. If anyone has any thoughts, ideas, this is very much a community engaged project. We are really looking for feedback and ways that we can improve things. And so please do share any of your thoughts.